We all know that money talks. When brands are boycotted, companies and consumers listen. Anger over the war in Gaza has led many to protest with their wallets. So, just what's been the impact of those efforts? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. McDonald's, Starbucks and Zara. They all made headlines recently and they certainly wish they hadn't. Several high-profile brands are coming under increasing pressure over Israel's latest war on Gaza. So, is it hurting their bottom line?
Not a typical place to protest. These clothing stores were targeted not for fashion, but photography. This Zara ad campaign drew heavy criticism over parallels with the war in Gaza. It was quickly pulled, though the company said the images represented a sculptor's studio and was finished before the conflict began. But the facts aren't necessarily what's most important. Starbucks CEO, in his end-of-year message, said, "Many of our stores have experienced incidents of vandalism. We see protesters influenced by misrepresentation on social media of what we stand for." The coffee giant fueled anger from both sides after conflicting messages of support. These are examples of organic boycotts, according to the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, or BDS movement, which puts pressure on companies that aid Israel.
We hope that our voice is delivered to these companies and they stop their support as soon as possible to protect our Palestinian brothers and to stop the aggression against Palestine.
Even the world's biggest fast food chain is taking notice. McDonald's CEO said recently that several markets in the Middle East and some outside the region are experiencing a meaningful business impact due to the war and associated misinformation that is affecting brands like McDonald's. As a result of this impact, McDonald's Malaysia is suing the BDS movement for over $1 million for false information and defamation over the company's alleged links to Israel. With many wanting to do something for the people of Gaza, do boycotts ultimately help or hurt?
Earlier I spoke with Omar Barghouti, who's the co-founder of the Palestinian Boycott, Divestment, Sanction Movement, BDS. Omar, thank you so much for your time and welcome to Roundtable again. First of all, how is the boycott movement doing since we last spoke?
I think the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, or BDS movement, has grown tremendously in terms of number of supporters, the breadth of the networks it has established, as well as its impact during Israel's ongoing genocide against the 2.3 million Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip.
Tell me, what do you say to any consumers, and I'm talking now in Western countries, who don't understand what's going on and who feel that they should be free to spend pounds, euros, dollars, kroner, wherever they wish? What do you say to people watching who don't really understand the power of the BDS movement and what it's all about?
Well, I would tell them that BDS was established in 2005 by the absolute majority in Palestinian society, basically to end state, corporate and institutional complicity in Israel's now 75-year-old regime of settler colonialism, apartheid, and military occupation. So the point is, we're not asking people for charity. We are appealing for solidarity, but above everything else, we're demanding an end to complicity. In other words, if a pension fund, if an institution is involved in Israeli systems of oppression, then it's oppressing us, it's harming us. So we're asking people to do no harm. If they cannot do any good, at the very least, do no harm. When people spend their money on products of companies that are involved in Israel's current genocide in Gaza, or in its system of apartheid that has been going on for decades, in home demolitions, illegal settlements in the occupied territory, in desecrating Muslim and Christian holy sites in Jerusalem, and so on and so forth, they're doing harm. So we're asking them, help us by ending complicity. End your complicity Try to spend your money elsewhere on more ethical, more socially responsible companies. Try to make your institution apartheid-free, so to speak, not to contract companies that are involved in grave human rights violations, and not to have institutional links with Israel and its complicit institutions.
Omar, do you think some companies out there have blood on their hands, for want of a better phrase?
Quite a few companies have blood on their hands, tens and tens of companies, starting with the companies that are selling weapons and military equipment to Israel while knowing that it's committing the most live-streamed genocide in history. In other words, the American Friends Service Committee, the Quaker group in the United States, has recently published a list of the most complicit companies that are involved in the arms trade with Israel while it's continuing its ongoing massacres in Gaza. That list is the absolute top priority that we're pushing for pension funds, investment funds to divest from, to exclude them from any contract. So that's extremely important. But other than that extreme case of companies that totally have blood on their hands, also companies that have contracts with apartheid and that are feeding the war chest of apartheid Israel in the current moment also have blood on their hands. So we're calling for a boycott of just a small list of companies to be as impactful as possible. We don't believe in those very long lists because it is not effective, it is not strategic, and we cannot have any impact.
Omar, what would you say to people who are perhaps just getting accustomed to all of this and learning and educating themselves, and for the first time are realizing that every penny, every pound, every dollar, every cent does have an impact? What would you say to people out there who want to take more of an interest in the BDS movement?
We say to everyone who wants to do the right thing, who wants to stand against apartheid, against colonialism, and against the current genocide, where tens of thousands of Palestinians, predominantly children, women, civilian men, have been massacred, denied food and water, deprived of basic necessities, and driven to starvation and famine, as UN experts have said. In this moment, yes, every purchase you make counts, but what's more important is if you work in a collective. BDS is most effective when people work in collectives. So if you join a solidarity group where you are, if there isn't a solidarity group, if you can form one and act collectively, if you're part of a union, mobilize pressure within the union to reject any contracts with companies involved in Israeli apartheid and genocide. If you're a student on campus, you can get your student government to take such decisions and pressure the school community, the campus, to take action against companies and against institutions like Israeli universities that are deeply complicit in apartheid or cultural institutions. So there's something for everyone to do, but it's most important to be targeted, to be strategic, to be ethically responsible, but to be collective. Because BDS is not just about being ethical and moral. That's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It is absolutely necessary to be effective and to be goal-oriented. So it's a golden balance between ethical principles and strategic effectiveness.
Well, let's meet our guests in London. Ben Jamal is director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and in Lancashire, in the United Kingdom, Aisha Ijaz. She is lecturer in marketing at Edge Hill University. Good to see you both. I'll start with you first of all. Aisha, just tell me, these boycotting campaigns like BDS, do they actually achieve anything, do you think?
I would say to measure its effectiveness, we would need to see what desired results are we expecting. Are we looking for something in the short term? Or are we looking for something in the more long term? So in the short term, it has been effective in creating awareness, rallying and support. There has been, and we've seen in the past week or two, some major brands saying that there's been meaningful economic damage to their brand or their sales or the revenue. But is it lasting? And in the past, I have a number of cases where brands have managed to recover, and we're talking about these big brands that are being boycotted. So the likelihood of them recovering seems more likely. But in the long term, we have these BDS movements and these campaigns to stop what's happening in Palestine. And if we look at being 3-4 months on from when everybody has been calling for a ceasefire, that has not happened. The same with the Ukraine war. There has been no ceasefire in that sense. But if we think about long-term damage to the brand and its reputation and image, there seems to be an effect there in terms of boycotting behavior with respects to that. So it's almost like we're in a day and an age where we're expecting brands to take a side. They can no longer remain neutral as such. But in terms of effectiveness, it would need to be measured between, I guess, short term and long term.
Ben, do you think the boycotts have been effective so far in what they've been doing over the last few months? I know they've been going on for decades, but in terms of global publicity?
I mean, I would echo some of what's just been said. And obviously, you know, in relation to the call for boycott, divestment and sanctions in relation to Israel until it ends its violation of the fundamental rights of Palestinians, that call obviously was issued in 2005. So, you know, we're 18, 19 years into a systematic campaign that has gained global support, you know, in response to that call. But I would echo what's said. It depends on how we're measuring success. So if the question put, has the BDS campaign working in various ways, and if you look at the boycott and divestment, you know, targeting companies, calling for public bodies to divest from complicit companies and targeting those companies directly themselves, has that created a body of pressure that has achieved its ultimate aim, which is shifting Israel's actions because of a body of international pressure? Then obviously you would say, no, it hasn't been successful. But if you're looking at, has it shifted the dial? Has it helped in terms of raising awareness? And has it helped in terms of, I would say, one fundamental task, which is shifting a narrative that's been dominant, particularly in Western political discourse, that says this is either a complicated issue or this is a situation of conflict. There are rights and wrongs on both sides. Israel is a democratic state functioning as a liberal democracy that might be overseeing a problematic occupation. And the BDS campaign starts from a framework of saying, look, actually, that's a fundamental misunderstanding in terms of narrative. This is a situation of deprivation of rights, of a people who are systematically oppressed under a system that meets the definition of apartheid, and that this oppression is sustained and can only be sustained in the same way South African apartheid was sustained, with the complicit support of governments, public bodies, and institutions around the world. So has it been successful in shifting that understanding? And one mark of that would be, has public opinion shifted in relation to Israel? And is Israel suffering some elements of isolation? Then I would say you'd come up with a different argument and saying, yes, it is being successful. Ultimately, of course, in order to be successful, ultimately, it is going to have to start to be able to apply those very specific levers of pressure so that Israel begins to feel the cost, feels that it's diplomatically, politically, and economically isolated, and that there is a consequence for its actions that it will have to pay unless it ends those violations of rights.
Aisha, is that a good point, that the victory here really for the Palestinian people is the publicity that the boycott campaign has created, not just in one country or one region, it is now a global phenomenon?
I think that's happened with the aid of social media and using video as a form of changing this narrative that was correctly highlighted. It's almost like people have now, what the videos that we can see coming from those parts of the world has changed that narrative, as opposed to what we would see on TV, on the news, especially within the UK. So I absolutely agree with that. I think it's also helped in using video form as opposed to reading about the conflict that has been going on for so many years. People can share and be emotional about how they would like to boycott or be part of the protest, or how they disagree with what's going on, or disagree with, I guess, supporting the government in terms of what the government wanting to support what's going on in the Middle East, and how many people we see on the streets protesting and boycotting against that. So I think it's really helped in that sense with allowing this boycott or this protest to have been around longer, as opposed to, I guess, previously. It's 3 months and we still see people boycotting and protesting.
Well, Aisha, you mentioned videos there. In our last show, looking at BDS, we highlighted the influence of social media influencers and celebrities as emerging as key players, really, in the battle for hearts and minds of consumers. It now seems that the focus has shifted away from influencers and more towards the masses, with everyday social media users just showing their support for the BDS movement. I just want to show our viewers a montage of just a few.
There is an update to the boycott list. The place to get more information on this is bdsmovement.net. They compiled a more accurate list so we can hit them where it hurts.
You are an investor and you put money every single month into an index fund, which is typically like 30 to 50 companies. And one of these companies are on that index fund. You can tell your index fund, hey, I don't want to put more money into your index fund because of how much this company is specifically profiting off the genocide of the Palestinian people. You think if enough people didn't do that, they wouldn't decide, hey, maybe we should sell our stocks into this company?
I'm going to show you how to make all of the drinks on the menu so you can enjoy them at home without having to spend your money and support Israel.
Do you know what that tastes like? Like a company that doesn't support genocide.
Aisha, social media has really become quite an amplifier of the cause here, hasn't it? That people, wherever they are, they can take a picture, share it, their opinion, put it out there. I mean, it has been impossible now for months to escape what Israel is doing in Gaza if you log on to any social media.
I absolutely agree. It's almost as if we can see how each Palestinian is living, being cut off to water supplies, etc. And this is what's rallied in probably a lot more protesters. I've come across studies that show a relationship, let's say, about religious intensity, so the level of religiosity and boycott participation. But we see how a lot of non-faith segment-based consumers now being part of this protest, just based on a simple humanitarian level, to see that what's being done and what they're being exposed to on social media. If it had, they're able to relate to it and say, had that been my child? And so for those reasons, they stand up against what's happening over in Israel.
And I guess it really helps people be informed about what's happening there, misinformation as well. We've had some companies, Starbucks and McDonald's, Ben, have come out and said that they're being targeted as a result of misinformation. Do you feel if these big brands and corporates had been much clearer at the very outset, people would still be buying their products, perhaps?
Yeah, possibly. One thing I would say about that, sometimes when people cast aspersions about the efficacy of boycott tactics, it's worth noting why companies like Starbucks and McDonald's feel it is so important to try to address what they classify as misinformation, because they are deeply worried. They've seen the effect that can be had in terms of brands if people become associated with actions that are regarded as deeply problematic. And I would also say the other answer I always give is look at how much energy Israel has been investing, particularly over the last 10 years or so, in what is a global delegitimization campaign. So a very specific campaign that has included encouraging friendly states, and the UK is one of them, to introduce laws to try to suppress activism for boycott, divestment and sanctions. And we have an anti-boycott bill going through our parliament at the moment. It's back in parliament tomorrow for its third reading, that's trying to stop public bodies, so universities, pension schemes, public pension schemes, from making decisions not to invest in companies that are complicit. That's part and parcel of what's happening globally. We've seen similar laws in France, across the United States, at Israel's urging, using the framework that such laws are problematic because they're targeting Israel as a Jewish state and therefore they're anti-Semitic. It's an entirely pernicious narrative. But the fact they're investing so much energy and time in doing that demonstrates Israel's awareness of the major strategic threat it faces if BDS succeeds and it becomes isolated in the way that happened with South Africa. And of course, there were a whole range of dynamics that ultimately led to the fall of apartheid in South Africa. But undeniably, the anti-apartheid movement and South Africa's economic, but very importantly as well, cultural isolation were a factor. And that's an important part of the BDS movement. I think some of the areas where you would point to some real material successes are in the sphere of cultural boycotts. I would say we're at a point now where there is no prominent artist who can go and play a gig in Israel or go and perform or tour in Israel without at least knowing they're going to be accountable. They're going to be called out. They are going to have a fan base that's coming after them. They are going to be highlighted for that. And so that comes into their calculation. Even if they don't make a decision on ethical grounds, they may make a decision ultimately on is it worth the risk to my reputation to go ahead and put Israel on my tour list. So, yeah, all of those things are extremely important and speak to, I think, some of the degrees of efficacy and what the campaign at heart is about, which is about saying, there's a fundamental question that whenever I bring a Palestinian to speak in the UK, they get asked, which is what can we do? And the answer is nearly always the same, which is focus your energy in your political locale to ending your complicity. So change your government policy, change the policy of your public bodies in terms of their investment policies, and target the companies that are providing the infrastructure for our oppression. That's what you can usefully do. And that message is getting through to people. And at the moment, that's dominating, in some ways, the conversation alongside the marches. People are saying, what can we do? What other actions? And that's why you've seen this very visible activities of people focusing on the companies they should be targeting at the moment.
I want to take a look at Starbucks. So they've lost $11 billion, or 9.4% in market value since mid-November. So they've had the workers' strike and pro-Palestine supporters calling for a boycott of the coffee company. Now, boycott supporters argue that this loss is a direct result of the boycotts, but just wondering how they can be sure. Sarah Senatore is a research analyst at the Bank of America, and she says this: I don't think it's protests that are driving this. This is not the first time we've seen this kind of activity. And so it's hard, in my view, to conclude that's the reason the traffic has been so slow. I mean, it can't just be coincidental, can it, Aisha, that Starbucks drops $11 billion in a couple of months?
I would say that is one of probably the causes, but I think Starbucks in general have made a number of poor decisions. And there have been cases in the US where, they've been accused of racial injustice, etc. And they've made a series of bad decisions, maybe on the employee's behalf. I think the case that I'm talking about is when there was, I think, a case of an employee calling the police on two people that were drinking a Starbucks because they hadn't paid or weren't drinking at that time. They had called the police to kind of ask them to leave because they hadn't purchased, and it was almost they were accused of some sort of racial injustice. So they had many cases where the company core values had not married up with their actions or their intentions. But I would say that they've been making a number of poor decisions, and this, in terms of what's happened, and I guess in this instance, we had a co-worker who was in support of Palestine, and the way they responded. So something you mentioned about before was crisis management. Sometimes companies respond either too quickly without thinking, or they respond too late. So when you ask the question about is it going to become more difficult as these boycotts? We're going to see more of them, and brands can no longer, even if they intend to, in the case of McDonald's saying that's misinformation, they want to remain neutral, but consumers are wanting brands, and as we go over, we'll see a future where they want brands to reflect their personal values, and so for the BDS movement, they would have to. I'm not sure, pick a side, but also make clear where they stand within this matter in terms of supporting the cause, whether it's donation. If we look at the example of Dunkin' Donuts, they remain neutral. But I think in America, there were some funds raised by some students based on this campaign that they had, in which donations were then given to in support of Palestine. And the company itself was praised for that.
Ben and Aisha, thank you both so much for your insight. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.